Curious to hear music by Lunar Composition Lab alums? Check out E4TT's annual concert of music by women and non-binary composers, Midnight Serenades, on Saturday, January 25th. Welcome to For Good Measure, an interview series celebrating diverse composers and other creative artists, sponsored by a grant from the California Arts Council. I'm Nanette McGuinness, Artistic Executive Director of Ensemble for these times. In this week's Lunar Module episode, we continue talking to E4TT Lunar Composition Lab Call for Scores winner and commissioned composer Madeline Clara Cheng, who we spoke to in May 2024. You've talked a bit about this, so you may not have more to say, but if you do, are there other aspects of music that interest you?
This would actually be a little bit tied into possibly my future goals for the arts, because of course there's no telling for sure, but I also know that um after having like grown up around some musicians in my family or some of my friends, and then now being immersed in an environment where, I can't like look in any direction without seeing an artist. Um exactly, but I have such a strong passion for advocating for
Ah,
artists and for their rights on their behalf, and I do that a lot already. When I have to help my friends say like, well, I'll often be the person that my friends come to when they're like, "Hey, I just got this contract for a performance," or "I just got this contract for a commission, and it's really long. Can you read it?" And I'll be like, "Of course, yeah, I'd love to do that." And I'll be like, are you sure, you wanna agree to this, or like you might want to double check on this like date that you agreed to." So
mm,
I'm always trying to be really good about like reading every word of like every contract of every agreement that I
good.
receive, and in return that my friends get, because I want to make sure they're not getting screwed over, or even when they're just like struggling to write an email to get more like financial aid, for example. I love helping them with that. And in a lot of the theater spaces that I'm in, or any other event spaces where they happen to have musicians as part of the show, I'm
Mhm.
always advocating for them as well. A lot of times people think it's like it's okay to not to not pay the performers, or be like, okay, well, we're all volunteering our time to make this production happen, so they should too. It's complicated in school production, especially when it's like an independent student production. You don't have a lot of money to go around. Um, but when you're in a theater space where you have like 24 hours of rehearsal a week, and then you're asking the musicians to be there for the theater kids, it might be more of something that they can put on their resume as something like, "Oh, I stage managed this production, or I produced
Mhm.
this show." But for musicians, it may be fun for them. Of course, they love music. It's passion. They have a passion for it, but it's also work for them. So I'm always like very conscious of, like how much time are they spending here? Like how much time had they had to commit to this? How many rehearsals do they have to be there for? Um,
Mhm.
how are they being compensated? And same thing for any other performances where I know they're more of like a work for hire than maybe part of like the, initial creative conception of the
Mhm.
project.
Mhm.
So that's also why I'm doing the arts admin internships too, because I feel really committed to cultivating the success of performing arts organizations. And, this is more greater entertainment industry, but I also really closely followed the recent writers and actors union strikes.
Yeah.
Um, I'm also really inspired by how much support and emphasis a lot of like European governments tend to put into arts and cultures that I've gotten to see at festivals.
Totally
Um,
different model. Yeah,
Oh, for
sure.
sure. So I'm always thinking about how we can, better support our artists.
No, that's lovely. And I mean, it gets tricky in a school production when it's students because it's considered part of their degree. So,
Exactly.
and yet one is often bringing outside people in, and it just gets really tricky. You are right about different models for the arts and for supporting the arts, Europe versus here. So, advocacy, writing, are we leaning towards investigating law?
I do actually have a minor in business law and another one in music industry. So I'm certainly like looking into studying that more, because I feel like it's so important, and I'm just so drawn towards that. I'm really excited to be taking a music law class this semester, and then hopefully like an employment law class in a future semester.
Hmm.
I just think it's so necessary because even though like we say so much we care about our artists, like just keep seeing so many different major entertainment organizations and also performing arts organizations just treat them like they're I don't know, like even just like the word like human resources to me is such an interesting thing. It feels like
Yeah.
we're like tools or part of this like cog in like a greater machine rather than bring the incredible creative value that artists do.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that the individual isn't really the focus, as
Yes.
opposed to the function or the group, a little bit like managed healthcare, where, instead of
Yes.
going to a doctor, you go to whoever in the group is available or whatever. Yeah.
Yes. On the healthcare note, because I know this since a lot of my family works in healthcare, um my my family has often kind of had to air out complaints about the management of hospitals because very often the managers don't have a medical background, and it's
Right.
not that they're not great business people or don't have that acumen for running an organization, but they can't empathize really with the people that they're working with. So that's another reason why I'm like very interested in arts management and like interested in people who actually like, both care about the arts and have that background and know what it's like to see it from an artist perspective.
Absolutely. If you have people managing who don't know how the sausage is made, then it's going to be a mismatch at some point, and often a big one. So no, that's very interesting and admirable, actually. That's wonderful. And it sounds like you've got so many things bubbling in your brain that it's really hard to know, and we'll have to check back with you in a decade to see where you land. Which
Yeah,
is
I mean, I'm curious to know where I'll be as well.
I think that's okay. That's really good. Talented creative people who are smart have trouble deciding in the decade that you're in. So yeah, let's check back. Let's switch gears here a little bit and go to the piece that you're writing for us, that we're excited to have you write for us. Any thoughts about that? Or is it still in the early goose stage?
It's still definitely in the early stages, but it's actually because ever since I decided that I wanted to write for vocals, because I've discovered like this past year that that is very artistically exciting to me to get to work with the human voice.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that I'm working with a poet who is one of my good friends from I've known her since elementary school, and
Wow.
we grew up together, and she's a fantastic writer. Um, but her name is Abby Williamson, and she's like working on the text right now, and I've been like looking over some of her past drafts. I tend to be very inspired by text. The piece that I had in January was based off of a poem as well,
Mm-hmm.
but I would say that the like I mentioned movement a lot. Text is the other big thing for me. I have like a folder in my desktop that's just like bits of like poetry or bits of just not even things that are intended to be artsy, just like things that people like say randomly that
Mm-hmm.
I just like save and keep away for in my little piece inspiration folder.
Right.
Um and I always like refer back to that when I need some sort of like spark to go off of. But I really love text, and I'd say that's been one of the biggest inspirations as well for a lot of my music. And I really like being able to work with, I mentioned lots of interdisciplinary collaboration, so I like to work with real life people who are actively creating music, since a lot of it's very easy to just go into the public domain space and find like an old dead dude who has written this, beautiful piece. But it's also very fun to recognize the great work that young hip cool people are putting out right now. So um I really want to be able to work with someone who was, kind of like a peer for me and also a really great friend. And she has a little poetry account on Instagram that I've been following for a few years. And I always like, I have some of hers saved to my inspiration folder as well. So when this commission called for a poet, I knew I had to reach out to her. So this will very largely be inspired once she finishes this text draft. But this semester for me was also like a really big masterclass in working with electronics. I've done it a few
Hmm.
times in the past, but this semester is when I really started to dive into it. I've never thought of myself as good with electronics, but I was kind of forced to be when the pieces that I was writing sort of called for it. Like
Hmm.
it felt like it just had to be that way. Like when the dance piece I was working for this semester was it was just really intense and had a lot of like dystopian themes for the piece that we were trying to go for. So I knew I had to incorporate, you know, like sirens, like really heavy hitting beats,
Hmm.
which was so different from what I had done, but I knew that anything else that I would come up with just wouldn't be the same.
Wouldn't
So
cut it. Hmm. Hmm.
exactly. So I'm excited to see how that will incorporate for this piece because I think there's lots of different ways it can go, and a lot of it again is going to depend on how this poem turns out.
Yeah. And in fact, I should point out to those listening that we didn't insist on voice. We actually gave you the list of instruments and options and let you pick. And I believe you gravitated there pretty quickly.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Not that I'm prejudiced, but there is something special about the human voice and about
Yes.
singing. It's trickier to write for, but it incorporates some really important stuff. I'm curious, what's the poem about, or what's the piece about, or do you have a working title?
We don't yet have a working title. She's basically sent me over a few things she's written in the past, as well as something like a story she's working on right now. It's about vampires. I think it's really exciting. We're sort of trying to like pick and choose and see what sticks. She's written some like lovely works in the past about all these different things. There's a really beautiful one about like a bookkeeper in a shop. It's very quiet and intimate. And then there's like a darker one about like a raven, which I again I love birds. My sister loves birds.
Right, right.
Very cool. I think one of her more recent ones that she showed to me was this lovely one about like a boardwalk by the sea. So nothing like that's like we've like firmly decided on yet, but there's a lot of really cool um concepts and ideas floating around. She
Hmm.
says that she tends to write a lot more, I guess, like somber and sometimes darker pieces, which I think is usually very different from how I write, but I always love to be able to push myself creatively. I think especially with electronics, I've done that a lot this semester, so thematically I'm also excited to dive into that world as well.
Yeah, E4TT has a very strong history of doing dark topics. So
Yeah.
that's it's not a problem for us if you do go in that direction. That's fine. It's our own one way of advocacy that we do.
Thank you for listening to For Good Measure, and a special thank you to our guest, Madeline Clara Cheng, for joining us today. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our podcast by clicking on the subscribe button and support us by sharing it with your friends, posting about it on social media, and leaving us a rating and a review. To learn more about E4TT, our concert season online and in the Bay Area, or to make a tax-deductible donation, please visit us at e4tt.org. This podcast is made possible in part by a grant from the California Arts Council and generous donors like you. For Good Measure is produced by Nanette McGuinness and Ensemble for These Times and designed by Brennan Stokes, with special thanks to co-producer and audio engineer Stephanie M. Neumann. Remember to keep supporting equity in the arts and tune in next week for Good Measure.